Welcome everyone to this special tutorial this week where I will be demonstrating some of my very favorite brush strokes with some of my very favorite brushes. But that's not all. I'm also going to show you how helpful and easy it can be to apply these techniques into real life paintings. Now, really quickly before we get started and while I pull out some of my personally designed craftamo brushes to use for the demonstration today, I just want to remind all of you that in just 2 days from today, Thursday, October 10th, this is going to be my brush launch day where these brushes will finally be available for purchase. This special and exciting premiere video that I have planned will begin at 9:00 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time, and I will be there online watching right along with you so you can live chat with me while this is going on. I have some exclusive deals and sales lined up, especially in honor of this brush launch day that I will talk more about in just a minute. But trust me, this is a day you don't want to miss. So make sure you mark your calendars and set your alarm. Once again, these brushes and the premiere day will both be available and ready on this Thursday, October 10th, 9:00 Mountain Daylight Time. Let me go ahead and pull out these 5 brushes to demonstrate with today and also show you what the inside of this brush box looks like. In fact, if you're interested in learning about all the ins and outs of this set, I actually just did a special unboxing video where I talk in greater detail and give more insight into the specifics of the packaging as well as the brushes themselves. So make sure you go back and watch that if you haven't already. But for the 5 brushes in this set, I have a large round number 10, a medium round number 6, a 1/4 inch angle brush, a small number 3 round, and lastly a number 1 rigger brush. These are some of my personal favorite brushes and brush sizes to use, which have the ability to create and paint some amazing things. I have personally customized the colors you see here, the types, the sizes, the logo, the measurements, etc., so that these perform in just the way I would like. So let's get right into it today. First off, let's go over each brush one at a time and test out some of the most common and simple strokes that they can do. This is valuable information for anyone to learn and practice, whether you're interested in buying this particular set or not. I'll start off with the number 3 round first. Now, something that small brushes are great at, and these in particular because they have such lovely tapered bristles and nice pointy tips, is that they can paint beautiful thin lines with a light and gentle touch of the hand. Now, because of the way these bristles are tapered, we can also gradiate our lines from small to broad by starting out with a light touch and then pressing down on the bristles to make a thicker line. Being able to have control over your brush in this way is extremely useful when it comes to painting things such as flowers, leaves, and grass, which is mostly what I teach here on this channel. If you're wanting to give petals a try, for instance, you begin the stroke with a light and thin stroke first, then you press down on the brush to make that stroke more thick at the other end. This is one of the quickest and most simple ways to paint one-stroke flower petals. If you'd like a thicker, larger, or more rounded petal, all you have to do is combine 2 of these strokes together. Then, if you start out this stroke in the same way, but let up on the bristles at the end, this creates more of a pointed tip rather than having it rounded off. You can easily paint things like grass or leaves using this technique. There are a ton of options here. It really just comes down to what you're painting, how thick, thin, round, or long you may want the stroke to be. I know I might be going through some of these kind of fast, but don't worry because we are going to use these same strokes again with the number 6 round now. Once again, this brush has a lovely tapered bristle, more thick at the base, and then transitioning to a lovely pointed tip. And because this brush has such a nice point, I can actually create some pretty thin lines using this as well. If I press down just a little bit more, I can create a medium or even thick lines also. Then, of course, you can create a thin to thick line by lifting up and pressing down on your brush as well, just like we did with the number 3. Let's give a few of these singular petal strokes a try next. And as I do this, take a look at how the bristles snap back into place after each stroke. And then, of course, there is the thicker two-stroke petal. As you can see, these are all very similar to what the number 3 round can do, but the sizing is, of course, larger because it's a larger brush. It really comes down to the space and sizing of what you're wanting to paint, and that's going to change what brush size you use. Let's move on to the largest number 10 round brush and see how some of these same strokes react with bigger bristles. Now, even though this brush is quite a bit larger, it still has a pretty pointy tip here. And if you can be very careful and just use that tip, even this brush can create some pretty thin lines. Press down a little bit for some more of the medium to thick lines, and then of course, the gradient line. I will also point out that I love using this brush for background washes of water and color as well. Because this is a larger size, it can hold quite a bit of water and also spread color and water through a large space or area quickly. Now, here are some of the one-stroke petals, and as always, you can make them longer or shorter to suit your needs by just pulling the stroke out longer or shorter. This large brush makes some great two-stroke petals or leaves as well. Nice and round and thick. Round brushes have a lot of possibilities with them. They are terrific with one-stroke type paintings as well as just blending and washes of colors, getting in and around other spaces of a painting. In my opinion, round brushes are a must-have when it comes to any type of watercolor painting. All right, let's move on to some of my favorite strokes with this angle brush. I couldn't not include an angle brush in this set. I just love some of the things it can do. I have a lot of great examples of one-stroke paintings an angle brush can pull off. So this is definitely one you should practice with and give a try. It is really so much fun to use. Now, with an angle brush, there will be one end of the brush that has a longer point than the other, and depending on how you turn or hold your brush can change what you can do with it. But if you just use the very tip of the brush and turn it using the thin side rather than the broad side of the bristles, you can still paint some pretty thin lines if you need to. You can also create some tapered lines by slightly turning the brush to the thick side and then back again. I use strokes like this to paint long blades of grass all the time. Then if you use the broad side of the brush, you can also create a really nice thick line here as well. Now, one of my favorite things to do with this brush is create petals with it. Hold the brush with the longer point facing downward. Then just pull the bristles out a little bit to create some sort of rounded, square-shaped petals. I'm going through this pretty quick, but I will demonstrate this technique more in just a minute. If you use a similar stroke to that, but make it a little longer and then slightly turn your brush at the end, you can also make more pointed petals and leaves as well. Then, of course, painting grass blades or leaves with the angle brush is so fun and easy. It takes some practice, but the key with the angle brush is just being able to control when and how to rotate or turn it in your hand to be able to get the thicker and thinner lines. You can also, of course, add 2 brush strokes of this brush together to create a more broad stroke or shape. All of this takes a little bit of practice to get down, just because unlike the round brush, you often have to sort of rotate the angle brush in your hand while you paint. But I want to encourage you to try this. Pull out a scrap paper and experiment and play around with some of these strokes. Okay, last up, we've got the small number 1 rigger brush here. I love using this brush as well. There is just no better way to paint thin lines than with this thing. If you are someone who struggles having a light touch of the hand with a round brush to create thin lines, then I definitely recommend this brush. It is almost impossible to have thick lines here. In fact, let me push down on this brush to demonstrate. This is really as thick as I can possibly make these lines with this brush. I especially love using the rigger to paint vein lines in petals or leaves, as well as thin blades of grass. You just can't go wrong with this. All of these brushes are my favorite go-to brushes. I just feel that I could paint just about any floral that I wanted using this set. And I may have gone through some of these strokes a little fast, but don't worry, because we are going to get into some of these brush strokes in more detail and actually apply them to a few paintings. Really quickly, I am going to throw out a little reminder that these brushes are only going to be available for a limited time, and there are also only a limited amount of sets as well. I've had a lot of interest in these brushes so far, and they may sell out fast. So make sure you sign up to be notified when they are available by using the link I have in the description of this video. I will also mention that there will be some exciting and exclusive deals associated with these brushes and their price, my brush launch day, October 10th, during the premiere, which I will explain in more detail in just a minute. So make sure you stick around so you don't miss out on that important information. Okay, now the paintings and techniques I'm about to demonstrate using these brushes and some of the brush strokes we were just testing out are actually going to be a card size or smaller versions of larger paintings that I have more detailed videos of here on my channel. So if you specifically like any of these in particular that I demonstrate today, I encourage you to watch the full-length tutorial because I really take more time to explain and get into the details for each of these paintings. I'm going to be going through these smaller examples pretty quickly today, but I'll leave links for the full-length tutorials in the description of this video if you'd like to check out any of those. This first painting is one of my most popular paintings here on this channel. This painting is demonstrating one of the most amazing things that watercolor paints can do, and that is create a transparent effect. So let's give this a quick try on this smaller paper here. You can try this with whatever colors you'd like, but I'm just using some very watered down azo yellow and some quinacridone rose, similar to what I've done in the larger painting. For this technique, I kind of like to just use and keep two brushes in my hand that I switch back and forth with. The larger number 10 for the base light and watered down yellow color, and the number 3 for the pink. I start this with some of that light watery yellow, and then I paint some broad strokes with the large brush by pushing down on the brush. I'll paint 2 or 3 of these strokes until I've got a nice petal shape. Then while that yellow base coat paint is still wet, I'll switch over to the smaller number 3 and the pink paint and carefully paint a small amount of color right around the edge of the petal. I usually get a little bit of this color on the very edge so that it's touching a bit of the dry paper as well as the paint. This creates a nice sharp edge of color around the outside and then blends and blurs with the colors on the wet inside. A very neat effect. You can even spread a small amount of that pink color to create some light vein lines throughout the petal to give it more detail and tie the colors together better. I'll paint 2 more of the same type of petals off to either side of the center one, and then we need to let that dry completely before painting on the second layer. I'm going to skip around a little bit just so we can get to some of these other paintings. But like I said before, if you're interested in learning more about this technique, I do have a full-length tutorial that will be more informative and helpful. After these first 3 petals are completely dry, I'm going to use that same technique once again to create a second layer of petals that sort of overlap these first ones. While we work on that, let me inform you of the awesome sale that we have planned for these brushes when they are finally ready for purchase. The great news, first of all, is that these brushes will be on a great deal for the first 7 days that they are available. This set price is normally going to be $60, but for the first 7 days, we are going to slash that price down to $55. But that's not all. If you really want to get the best deal possible, during the premiere video, we will also be offering a 5% discount code that will be offered on top of that sale price. The only catch to that is that the code is only active and available while the premiere is going. So it's really important that you be there for the premiere so you can get the best deal possible for this set. One more quick thing, I have an exclusive painting that I will be demonstrating during this premiere in honor of the launch. I will be sharing a 50% off promo code for the Etsy outline that goes along with the painting. This is a deal I have never offered before, and it is only available that first day of the premiere. So make sure you mark your calendars and set your clocks for October 10th. This is a day you don't want to miss. All right, enough of my blabbing. To finish this painting off, let's take the number 3 round and some green paint to paint on this nice thin stem line. Then I'll switch over to the number 6 round after that and paint in a few leaves or grasses using the stroke that moves us from a thin line to a thick line and back to the thin line for the ends. This is an awesome painting. It can make a great card like we just did, or you can try the larger piece and use it for decor in your home. This is just such a fun and unique technique, so I hope you'll give it a try. All right, next up, let's give a few autumn leaves a try. This is a piece that is super quick and simple, yet it's also very beautiful. This time we're going to use the number 6 and the rigger brush. You can choose whatever colors you'd like for this, but I've got a mixture of burnt umber with a little bit of cadmium red mixed in for a rich reddish brown. I'll start by painting a thin stem line or branch line using the rigger brush to give me somewhat of a base or a guideline as to where I want the leaves to stem out from. Then using the number 6 brush, I'll use basically 2 strokes of the brush, sort of like we practiced, to create one side of the leaf and then the other. It might also be fun to add a gradient or accent color on the tips of these leaves by using a slightly darker brown and placing that in while the leaf is still wet. Once again, I have a more detailed tutorial of this on my channel, which I will leave a link to if you're interested. And in this tutorial, I also paint a fun yellow flower on a different card, so it's worth checking out. These are really simple and uncomplicated, yet very fun. Now that my main leaf branches are done, I'll use the rigger once again and add in a few extra little twig lines in the background as a fun little accent. This just kind of completes and finishes the look off. All right, this next one is one of my personal favorite flowers to paint. Again, we'll go through this pretty quickly now, but the full-length tutorial is more detailed if you want to give it a try. These are so fun and really not too hard to do. We'll start by using the number 6 round brush, and of course you can paint these in whatever color you'd like, but I'm just going to go ahead with some gamboge yellow and make it similar to what I have on the larger painting. I'll use just some simple 1 and 2 stroke petal shapes for the tops of these flowers. These are just loose and fun. They don't all have to be the same size and same shape. I'll just paint 2 of these flower heads for this little sample card, but really you can paint however many you like. Now it might be fun to just add a few small buds in here and there. Let's pull out the rigger brush again and use a little bit of green to paint in a touch of greenery at the base of the flower heads. Then after that, I'll paint on some nice thin stem lines to keep this simple and delicate looking. Next, I'll pull out the small number 3 round and paint on a few leaves among some of these stems here. At this point, you could just leave it as it is, or you can add a touch more greenery here along the base of the flowers. I'll use the rigger to paint some wispy grass lines, and then I'll pull out the angle brush to paint in some longer and thicker grass. To me, this kind of just ties everything together and finishes the look off. All right, next up is another awesome demonstration. People have been really enjoying this little painting, and we get to use the angle brush for this technique today. And it really isn't too complicated either. So for these little buds, I'm going to create a bit of a two-toned effect. The way to really make this work is all about how to actually load the brush with paint. I'll explain it a little bit here, but if you want more details and close-up views of these instructions, I really recommend watching the full-length tutorial that I just put out a few weeks ago. Basically though, I'll load my brush first with some really watered down light base coat color. One of the keys to this though is that you really do want to have it nice and wet. After the brush is loaded with that light base color, then you'll swipe the very tip or even just the first half of the longer bristles through a second, darker, more concentrated color. Then after you've got your brush fully loaded, you'll paint the first petal shape by holding the longer tip of the brush pointing downward and then painting sort of a C shape, finishing off the tip of the petal with the short or back end of the brush. Like I say, the full tutorial is much more informative if you actually want to give this a try, but I'll just paint on the first half of these buds right now. I'll let them dry completely, and then I'll paint on the second half in the same way as the first. We'll just be curving the brush in the opposite direction. My example of this here doesn't show this quite as good as my full-length tutorial, but what's really fun about this is seeing the natural gradient of dark to light colors with just one simple stroke of the brush. And then because we let the first petal dry before adding the second stroke, this creates a bit of separation or a natural line in the center of the bud, giving it some depth. After the petals are dry, then we can pull out that rigger again and paint in some greenery at the base of the bud, as well as some nice thin stem lines and maybe even some wispy background grass. At this point, you do have some options here on what to do next. You can make these look more like tulips and paint in some longer, thicker grass at the base using an angle brush or the larger round brush. Or you can paint these to be more like rosebuds and add in some greenery surrounding the flower heads using the number 6 round brush and just a few simple strokes. If you choose to make them more like a rose, then you're also welcome to paint leaves that are more rose leaf looking too, by just using the exact same strokes of the angle brush that we use for the flower bud heads. Or you can do like I've done here and just use a combination of both. Really, whatever you want. You can just feel free to play around and be creative here. All right. For the last little sample I'll show you today, I'll paint some little flowers that when bundled up together, they resemble a hydrangea flower. I'll once again use the angle brush to get started, and my paint colors consist of a variety of mixtures using dioxazine purple with some alizarin crimson, and dioxazine purple mixed with some ultramarine blue. To see this in greater detail, as I've said before, you can go back and watch the full-length tutorial. But basically, I'll just use a combination of these different colors in a variety of values and begin painting on some little 4-petal flowers using only one stroke of the brush. I'll hold the brush with the longer point facing downward, then gently pull the brush outward and maybe even slightly up to create a bit of a point at the tip of the petal. I'll just continue this process over and over again, painting these 4-petaled flowers as close together as I can and maybe even overlapping them a bit until I've created sort of a circle shape or ball of flowers. Sometimes to help finish off the look of the ball, I'll just add some separate individual petal strokes along the edge to sort of round it off a little better. We need to let all of this purple area dry completely before painting more on here. But while we wait, let's pull out the large number 10 brush and use some broad strokes to paint in a few leaves surrounding the flower head. It might even be fun to paint in a little brown branch line using the small number 3 round. I'll use a lighter brown for the base color, such as some burnt umber, and then I'll add in a little bit of darker brown to create a bit of shadow, maybe a mixture of burnt umber and some ivory black. Now, the trick to really making this painting pop is painting some dark purple in all these little empty white spaces between these little flower clusters. I'll use the small number 3 round to help me get into all these tight spaces, but it's really amazing how this just creates a 3D look after doing this. It does take a little bit of time, but I think it's worth it in the end. I'm painting this piece pretty quick, and I'm probably not being quite as careful as I should, but this is, after all, just a quick demonstration of the technique. For a final finishing touch, I'll paint on some little center dots onto each flower, and then I'll pull out the rigger again and paint some thin vein lines on all of the leaves. These were all fun and quick little demonstrations on some of the larger paintings that I created in the past, using a lot of the techniques and brush strokes that I showed you at the beginning of this video, which is what makes knowing those brush strokes so valuable. There are so many things that you can create with these techniques. All that is required is a little imagination and practice. Make sure you tune in this Thursday, October 10th, 9 o'clock a.m. Mountain Daylight Time for my special premiere and launch video of my Craftamo brush set, where I will be watching right along with you to live chats. This is going to be epic, and I hope you can all come and be a part of it. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy lives to watch today. I hope you found some of the techniques helpful and informative. If you did enjoy this tutorial, I hope you'll consider subscribing to my channel so I can continue to help you discover your artistic side.